Hey YouTube, this is Pokemon Classics, and today I'm going to share with you my latest PSA submission. So usually when I send off cards to PSA, I'm looking for those Gem Mint 10 candidates. And with this submission though, I was a little more inclusive. I included some cards that'll likely get PSA 8s. Most of these are PSA 9, and the cool thing about this submission is it's 185 cards, and almost all of them are first edition WotC cards. So let's jump into this. I'll show you guys the cards. We're going to run through them pretty quickly because obviously there's a bunch of them. So we'll start with this first edition Beedrill. This one I'm expecting to pull an 8. It might be a 9. There's not a lot of damage to it. Same with these Dragonairs. I included 2 Dragonairs in this order, and the Dragonairs are likely going to be 9s. There's a little bit of edge wear on the back, but these are definitely pretty solid candidates. Not likely going to pull the 10 on those ones though. Electabuzz, solid 9 there. The centering is too far off to get a 10, but you know, 9s are a solid grade. You can't be too upset with those. Next we have an Electrode, first edition base set. This was the set that started it all, and I'm fortunate to have stocked up on a ton of first edition WotC cards back in the day when you could find them. That's really not the case anymore. We've got a Pidgeotto. Again, this one's likely a 9. And then all these first edition trainers are probably going to get 9s. There are a few that have 10 potential, but the centering is just a little too far off. So we got a Clefairy doll. Imposter Professor Oak. I actually included 2 of those. Again, you can tell that the centering, top to bottom, left to right, neither of those really fall in the PSA 10 parameters. So unfortunate, because these are all really good condition. Item Finder used to be a really expensive one. I'm not sure how much Item Finder goes for these days, but at one point it was pushing like $1,000 if you got it in a 10. I've included 3 Item Finders. Again, they're all first edition. And there's maybe one that could get a 10, but I wouldn't bank on it. And that's kind of the thing too. I'm a very picky grader. When I'm going through cards, I assume that none of them are going to get 10s. Even though my 10 rate has been pretty good in the past, I never take a 10 for granted. PSA graders, it's subjective. One minor flaw can throw that off balance. So for Pokemon Breeder, we've got 3 of those. Might have a 10 in here, but some of them have like a dot of edge wear. You can't really tell in that top corner, but each one of these is pretty minty. If you're wondering why I'm glancing up, that's because that's where the monitor is for my downward facing camera. So I apologize about that in advance, guys. We've got a Pokemon Trader. And a little off center. This scoop up, I think, has a really good shot at a 10. It's definitely a strong 9. The centering is perfect on it. The backside is flawless. There's no dots. This one, I think, has the potential. We've got a Super Energy removal. Good centering on the front. A dot of edge wear on the back. Again, it's a possible 10. Now we're getting into some uncommons. So I actually wanted to send in a bunch more uncommons and commons from first edition base, but I ran out of the card savers, and so I'm gonna have to split my order into 2 orders, which is fine. This one was already getting pretty large to begin with. And I'm sure PSA is gonna be backlogged for quite a while. And the turnaround time on these orders is probably not gonna be very good. So we got an Arcanine. We've got Charmeleon. This was one of my favorite cards growing up as a kid. Both of those likely 9s. I think one of these Dratinis has a shot at a 10. It'd be this top one. It's a little off center left to right, but that's the only flaw with it. And even if they grab 9s, I'd still be happy with that. And then we got a couple of Farfetch'd. Farfetch'd? That's hard to say. Anyway, we've got 2 of the birds with the onion. And then there's actually 2 Kadabras, but I've divided my stacks of cards into 25. That's how I'm going to package them for PSA. And so this is the first of the 2 Kadabras. Interesting fact about Kadabra, there was a like street magician. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong if you know more about this, but somebody sued the Pokemon franchise for the name Kadabra, like the person's name when translated to Kadabra, and he'd do magic tricks with spoons. And so I don't really know what the deal was with that, but apparently Nintendo and Wizards of the Coast stopped releasing Kadabra cards as a result. Anyway, there's the other Kadabra. Now I know this might be a little bit controversial, but Haunter is my favorite of the 3 ghost Pokemon in that evolutionary series. Ghastly's okay. I know a lot of people love Gengar, but I'm all about Haunter. I think he looks scarier. I think even this card, I like the artwork better on it than the Fossil Gengar, which was the first rookie card, if you will, for Gengar. Anyway, we got 3 Hunters. Again, all these cards are probably going to be 8s or above. Expecting 9s on most of them. These 2 Ivysaurs are probably going to get 8s. There's a little bit edge wear on the back, but I wanted to include them because the starters, even if they're only in an 8, are still pretty desirable cards, and people are after them. So yeah, got 2 of those. Then we've got Machoke with his rippling biceps, and figured why not throw in 3 Machokes. One of these I think does have a shot at a 10. I'm not banking on it, but strong 9 candidate anyway. So 1, 2, 3, you can count them out there. 3 Machokes for grading. All right, that's gonna do it for the first edition base. Next is Shadowless. Now most of these Shadowless cards are the ones that are probably the poorest condition out of anything that I'm submitting, and so most of these I think are in the 7 to 9 category. I'm certain none of them are going to get 10s. There's a couple that have a shot at a 9, like this Alakazam is pretty nice. No edge wear. I think there's like 1 print line on it and 1 surface scratch. So it just depends on how picky PSA is, because sometimes they let those slide, but I would disqualify it from a 10 because of that. We've got 2 of the Clefairies. One of my least favorite base set holographics of the original 16. Next, we've got the Shadowless Hitmonchan. He's got his boxing gloves. Very playable card back in the early WotC days. And I played the card game. That's really how I got started in Pokemon. I had friends that played. They pulled me into it. Helped run a league for years and amassed my collection. We've got the Shadowless Machamp, and I believe there's no special designation for Shadowless for the Machamps when you submit them to grading. So if you're savvy and you know what you're looking for, sometimes you can score a good deal on eBay with the Shadowless version, because that one's certainly more desirable to people and to collectors than the unlimited variant. Next, we have Magneton. This one's almost certainly going to get an 8. It's got a couple of light surface scratches. And usually that's the difference for a lot of people. They overlook the surface of the card, especially on the holographic portion, because you can only see it from certain angles with certain light. But that's a dead giveaway for a PSA 8, usually. Next, we got 2 Nidokings. This is one of my favorite cards growing up. He's still one of my favorite Pokemon. I really like Nidoking. I like Alakazam, Arcanine. Those are probably my 3 favorites. For Ninetales, we've got 2 Ninetales, and both of these are probably in the 8 realm. Again, light surface scratches, print lines. They're right on the border, I would argue, for 9s, but when a grade is hovering between 2 grades, I like to assume that it's going to get the lower of the 2. That way, it'll be a pleasant surprise if it actually performs better than expectation. And then wrapping up the Shadowless, we have Shadowless Zapdos, the first legendary bird to be released in English. And we'd have to wait for Fossil before Moltres and Articuno would become available in English. Next, we're jumping over to first edition Jungle. And now these are kind of the wild cards in the whole mix, because I've seen graders approach Jungle differently depending on the grader. One of the things that the Jungle set is notorious for having is this really light chipping on the front edges, and it comes that way straight out of a pack. Some graders overlook that and they just see that as part of the release of the cards, like that's how they were printed and it's not damage. Some will dock multiple grades, multiple numbers off the grade for that chipping. And again, it's a very common issue. It's one of the reasons why Jungle is so hard to grade, because almost every one of these cards will have some form of chipping on it, whether it's across the bottom or the sides. That's really the only thing wrong with these, and there's 3 of them for the Clefaibles anyway. And this could be a pretty high value card if graded a 10. I'm assuming they're going to get 8s or 9s. Again, the centering may have issues. There might be a print line, but there's certainly that little bit of chipping, and you know, it's a game of roulette when you're sending cards to PSA with those types of things. The consistency would be nice, I think. I'm not the type of person that would complain about grades or about PSA being more strict or being less strict, but I do think the consistency is one of the issues that a lot of collectors have with PSA. 2 electrodes. And we'll continue Jungle here with the next set of cards. We're up to 50 now in the submission. So some of the big favorites coming up here. I know a lot of people really like the Evolution cards, and started off with 2 Flareons. These I've got pre-graded as 8 to 9, again, depending on how the grader assesses the chipping. Nice cards there. Next, we've got some Jolteons. There's actually 3 of them in this order. I think at least one of these will come back a 9, and I would be so stoked if some of these are in 10s, but I just don't see that happening personally. There's the back. All those looking really nice on the back side. Kangaskhan, we got 2 of those in this order. These ones will probably be 8s. Kangaskhan is one of the most difficult cards from the Jungle set to grade. A lot of white hollow area, very susceptible to scratching. It shows up more easily, more readily in light than some of the darker hollows. Next, we got a Mr. Mime. First appearance in the Wizards of the Coast era for Mr. Mime here in the Jungle set. Next, we have 2 Nidoqueens to go with the 2 Nidokings earlier. Couples. And then Pidgeot. This card I used to think was so powerful when I first started collecting and playing. Me and my friends didn't really know the rules of how to play the game, and we saw this second attack, this Hurricane, how it would like remove the defending Pokemon for play and return it to your opponent's hand. And we're like, I can knock out a Charizard in one shot. We obviously weren't playing correctly, but because of that, this card is just legendary status in my mind. Then we got a pair of Pincers. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the misprint version of Pinsir. There's one where there's like a scratch error right above the first edition stamp. I actually have one of those in my personal collection. It's kind of cool. It's not a very well-known error. It's not one of the really desirable ones either, but still cool nonetheless. Next, we got a Scyther. This Scyther should grade at least a 9. It has a shot at a 10. Probably won't get the 10, but this is a really clean looking Scyther. I'm excited for this one. Next, we got the big man, Snorlax. 2 Snorlaxes in this submission. It's one of my favorite Pokemon. Wasn't a particularly playable card back in the day. Sorry, I'm moving the cards around too much, but I'm trying to clean them up a little bit. Got some dust on these. These card savers have been in a drawer for a long time. Next, we have Vaporeon, the 3rd of the original evolutions. And then next, 2 Wigglytuffs. Now, I believe Wigglytuff is one of the most difficult cards in Jungle to grade. I haven't looked at the population report recently, but for the longest time, I feel like this card was one that people didn't really care about. But now Wigglytuff is gaining traction in price and in desirability. Next, we're on to 1st edition Fossil. This was one of my favorite sets growing up. I was so excited for like Dragonite, for Ditto, and those Pokemon that this one really excited me. So we've got 2 Articunos. These ones have some light print lines on them, and it's a little bit more prevalent than some of the other ones. It's a very tough grade in a PSA 10. These ones I'm expecting 8s on. It'd be really cool if they got the 9s, but I don't know. I don't see it happening. Next, we got a Ditto. Nice card there. This Dragonite's probably an 8 to 9. The centering isn't good enough for a 10, so I've definitely ruled that out. I'd be stoked with a 9, but even an 8 would be a solid grade here. And then one that I know a lot of people like, and that's Gengar. And I actually have 2 Gengars going out in this order. These ones are likely 9s. I'm hoping to get a 10, but I think a 9 would be a solid grade for those. All right, and we're back. I had to switch over the camera on that. As I was saying, there's 2 Gengars in this submission, so here's the other Gengar from the Fossil set. And then we've got 2 Haunters. As I mentioned earlier, Haunter is my favorite of the Ghost family. Both of these are pretty nice. For Hypno, another psychic Pokemon, I had 3 of those in this order. Centering's a little bit off on the first one and the second one. Third one's got a decent shot at a 10 though. And very little whitening on any of these cards. This is actually like, I don't know, maybe a 1/6 of my inventory of first edition WotC Hollows. I went through all of them looking for the best of the best, and I'm not disappointed with these. Hopefully they come up with some good grades here. We've got 2 Kabutops. This was a card I was really excited about when they first were released back in, what was it, 2000, 2001, when the Fossil set came out? Lapras, the most difficult card to grade from the Fossil set. This one's definitely not a 10. The centering alone will disqualify it. There's also a print line on it. Probably a 9. Could get an 8, depending on the day. Still a pretty cool card, though. And we've got Magneton. This is actually one of the easiest cards to grade in the set. Got 2 of those. I would be surprised if at least one of these didn't get a 10. Having said that, I never assume a 10. And Muck. Muck is one that a lot of people are not particularly enthusiastic about, but got 2 Mucks. And keeping our trend of 2 of the Raichus. This is the second Raichu holographic that was released by Wizards of the Coast. The first one obviously being the base set variant. This is the Fossil version. He's a little bit more plump in this artwork. Plump Raichu. And then to cap off Fossil, we've got 2 Fossil Zapdos holographic cards. This one's pretty off-center, top to bottom. The second one is looking pretty good. All right, next we're going into the Team Rocket set. We'll start things off with a Dark Alakazam. This is probably... Actually, no, the Blastoise is probably the worst of the conditions in these. This is probably the second worst. The back is perfect. The problem with it, though, is there's a couple print lines on the holographic surface. This Blastoise, I would be very surprised if it got above an 8. There's a couple of light surface scratches, and generally speaking, those are going to knock down the grade. Sometimes if they're not noticeable, if it takes direct light, they might be overlooked by the grader. These ones seem a little bit more prominent. Out of order, but this is how I put it into my PSA submission, is Dark Arbok. This is actually card number 2. This one's looking really good. It's usually not a very difficult grade. And then we have Dark Dragonite. This is one of the key players from this set. This is one that a lot of people really like. The holo pattern is amazing. I actually have a version of this, the non-holographic error card. There's one that's numbered number 5. that's supposed to be holographic, but it's non-holo. But it's the first edition version that's actually the most rare. I don't have one of those. I would really like one, though. The prices on those can get really steep really quickly, though. We got a Dark Golbat. Dark Gyarados. I have 2 of those in this submission. Both of these, I think, have a pretty good shot at a 10. Centering is great. Edges are great. Not a lot wrong with those. And then we have a Dark Hypno. Kind of a funky psychedelic artwork with all the eyes going on in the background and the pendulum. It's a cool one. We'll grab our next stack here. We're 100 cards deep in this 185 card submission. Next, we have Dark Slowbro. From there, Here Comes Team Rocket. This is the first card that actually featured Jesse and James in it, at least that I'm aware of. Usually a pretty easy grade on that one. Same with Rocket Sneak Attack. This one's off center. No way this one's getting a 10. Then Rainbow Energy. This one is worth quite a bit if you can successfully get it in a PSA 10. The holo is so large, there's almost always holo scratches on these. This one, though, is looking really good. It's a little bit off center side to side, so we'll see. This would be a cool one, though, to get in PSA 10. Next, we have some Gym Heroes cards. This is the set that I have the least of in terms of inventory. Well, we started off with a Brock's Rhydon. From there, we switch over to Erica, her grass-type Pokemon. This is her Vileplume. I don't know about the rest of you guys. Maybe leave me a comment in the comment section on which set you liked more, Gym Heroes or Gym Challenge. I know personally, I'm much more into the Gym Challenge series. Got Misty's Seadra. Misty's Tentacruel. This one is actually one of my favorite ones from the Gym Hero set, though. Rocket's Moltres. Got a cool holo pattern. It's a legendary bird card, so that's always a positive. This is maybe the most popular card from the holographic set. Maybe the second most popular. Usually it's Blaine's Moltres and Sabrina's Gengar. I know Gengar is a crowd favorite out there, and with good reason. And the Japanese version of this, I think, is even cooler because it had, like, the actual graveyard more prominent in the artwork. Then we have a Misty. Some of these trainer holos are worth a ton in PSA 10 from Gym Heroes. The Brock, for example, I think sold for over $2,000. The Erica, or maybe it's the Lieutenant Surge, is the other expensive one. Making our way to Gym Challenge next, we just started off with 2 Blaine's Arcanines. The cool thing about this card is it was the first one that had an attack value of over 100. This is 120, and that was something that hadn't been seen prior to the Gym Challenge set. So, pretty iconic card here. 2 really good copies of it. Then we got 2 Brock's Ninetales. They're all sleeved up and ready to go. Again, this one's usually a pretty easy grade comparatively with a lot of the other cards in the set. So we're hoping to get a 10 on one of those. Maybe both would be nice. Tough card to grade here, Erica's Venusaur. I do have one in my personal collection. That's a 10. I have the whole set in the PSA 10. This one I'm pretty confident won't get the 10. I'd be happy with a 9, but honestly, even if it gets an 8, I still think that would be a pretty good grade. Next, we got 2 Giovanni's Gyaradoses. Both of these are slightly off-center. I think one of them is within the parameters of PSA 10, but that's assuming everything else is flawless. Pretty nice cards there, though. Got a Giovanni's Machamp. I said this earlier, but I really like Nidoking. It's one of my favorite Pokemon. And so Giovanni's Nidoking has this, like, really intimidating stance as he's just kind of squaring up with the artwork. I like it. Not one of the more desirable cards from the set, you know, comparatively speaking. This one is the most difficult card from the set to grade in a PSA 10, the Giovanni's Persian. This one isn't going to get a 10. Possibly a 9. I feel like it's a good 9 candidate. It's not a strong 9, but it's not a weak 9 either. It's probably somewhere in the middle. Next, we have Koga's Beedrill. This one has a couple print lines on it. I still think it's a candidate at a PSA 9. If it gets PSA 8, though, that's certainly understandable. Next, we have Koga's Ditto. This card I was never particularly passionate about. The artwork is, I don't know, it doesn't have that same appeal, I feel anyway, as the fossil version. Here's a card that's been making a lot of noise in PSA 10 lately. Misty's Golduck. Now these, I'm expecting 9s on both of them. They have like a print line, maybe a dot of edgeware on the back, something like that. But as I was pre-grading them, I really didn't think that they would pull the 10s. It'd be nice if they do, but I'm not banking on it. Got a couple more gym challenge cards here yet. Starting with Misty's Gyarados. Interesting thing, this set actually has 2 different Gyaradoses in it. It has Misty's Gyarados, and it has Giovanni's Gyarados. I think I like Giovanni's better personally, but that's just me. This is a card that I really liked from this set, Rocket's Zapdos. I actually played this card in the decks pretty regularly. The 20 damage and the energy attraction from Zapdos is a pretty good starting card for a basic Pokemon. Next, we have Sabrina's Alakazam, and that's going to bring to a close the Gym Challenge section of this PSA submission. Now we're getting into one of my favorite sets, and that's Neo Genesis. Start off with Ampharos. Generally one of the lower valued and easier cards to grade in this set. And we have Blossom. This one's too far off center to get the 10, in all likelihood. I mean, I wouldn't rule it out, but this one's probably going to get a 9. This for Alligator, I would pre-grade at an 8. Still a pretty valuable card in an 8, so I decided to include it with this PSA submission. Usually I rule out cards that are unlikely 9s. Got 2 Meganiums. This is the Meganium number 10. This is the more difficult one to grade. Very low population on these on 10s. I do have 1 10 in my personal collection. In fact, the only ones that I need to finish off that set in PSA 10 are Slowking and Typhlosion 17, and neither of those are going to happen in this submission, unfortunately, but it'd be nice to track down those cards. I think I'm probably never going to get them. They're probably out of my price range. We'll see. Things happen. That's the way collecting works. Next, we have Pichu. And we've got a Slowking. This one I would say is borderline 9, maybe an 8. Really notorious card for hollow scratches, the print lines when it comes out of the pack. And that's the case with this card. Steelix, this one's in pretty good shape. We'll see what happens with that one. Then we've got the Togetic. Little off center, but very nice looking card. And then lastly, we have 2 Metal Energies. This is a card that's not worth particularly much if it's in a PSA 8 or a PSA 9, but if you can hit gold on the PSA 10, then this card becomes incredibly valuable and sought after. This one here on the right has really good centering, and neither one has any hollow scratching. And this one's not centered too bad either, so there's a chance on these. I don't know if they're going to take it, but it would be really nice to get another one of these in PSA 10. I got my fingers crossed. Some Neo Discoveries up here, and we'll start off with Fortress. Then we've got a Hitmontop. Next up, one of my favorite cards from this set. I really like the artwork on this Kabutops. Very nice. One that I'm not particularly fond of is this Magnemite. Like, I think the holo pattern is really cool, but I don't know. Like, having Magnemite as a holographic card just seems out of place. There are so many other cards that would be more sought after, more deserving, maybe is the right word, of having a holographic. Then we have the debut of Politoed, second evolution for Poliwhirl. So I threw in one Politoed, and then we also have the Poliwrath from the same set as well. This one I think has a shot at a 10. It's probably going to get a 9. There's nothing wrong with the backside. Front is pretty well centered. Then we have Scissor, the evolution of Scyther. This one I think has a print line or two on the front. Could easily get a 9 though on that one. This card is tough to grade. Smeargle. Got his tail, he's painting with it. Really cool card. We're sending off 2 of those. We got Unknown A. First letter of the alphabet. Gets its own holographic card. And then a first edition Wobbuffet, which was a Team Rocket Pokemon in the anime. All right. We've only got 2 more stacks, folks. Now, I know what you're thinking in seeing the Yanma, but it's not just one Yanma, it's 2. Neither one of these are getting a 10, so you can immediately pull that out of your frame of reference. They both have print lines on them, a little bit off center. Could potentially get 9s, 8s are a possibility as well. We'll have to see what happens with those. Next, we're going into Neo Revelation, and none of these I'm that optimistic about getting 10s. I think some of them are possible for it, but very, very difficult set to grade in 10. In fact, I think I have 5 Neo Revelation first edition cards in 10, and I've graded a lot of them over the years. We'll start out with 2 Amphiroses. The problem with these is you can get them out of the pack with pretty good centering, and the cut is usually really good with very minimal whitening on the back. But the problem is they're just notorious for print lines, and there's nothing you can do about that. That's not a damage issue, that's just a manufacturing issue. Got 2 Blissies. Same thing, I'd peg these at maybe 9s, 8s, depending on how the graders react to the print lines. We've got a Crobat, a Delibird. I mean, some of these are a little bit easier to grade in 10, like the Crobat and the Delibird aren't that bad. Houndoom's pretty difficult to find in a 10. We've got 2 of those. Pretty valuable card, too, if you can land this one in a 10. Next up is a Jumpluff. Then we've got Magneton. So we had Magnemite in the previous set in Neo Discovery, and then Neo Revelation gives us Big Brother Magneton. Mischievous. This is or Mischievous, however you pronounce it. This is a card that's very difficult to grade in a 10, and I can personally claim that I have graded 3 of the Gem Mint cards for this particular one. I still have 2 of the 3. One of them I sold. This was years and years ago. I sold it for $300, I think, which was a really good price at the time. I have my other one up on eBay at the moment. I think I have it listed for $5,000. I'm not really interested in selling it, to be honest with you. And I've had offers in the 3,000 plus range on it. Next, we have Porygon 2. I really like the look of the original Porygon better than Porygon 2. Kind of like the angular shape of its body rather than rounded body structure of Porygon 2. Now we have some Neo Destiny. Dark Crobat. Dark Donphan. This one's in pretty good shape. A little off-center. Likely 9 candidate there. We have 2 Dark Feraligators. Dark Porygon. This is another set where, like, it kind of depends on the grader that you get, because similar to the jungle set, there's usually some silvering on the edges. It was just the way that they were cut. And often graders will either completely omit the fact that there's silvering and it doesn't factor into the grade, or they'll use that as justification to instantly bump it down to an 8. So hopefully the latter is not the case, because these are in really good condition otherwise. We got 2 Dark Scissors. I actually sold one of these in PSA 9 the other day in my eBay store. The most difficult card to grade from this set is Light Togetic. This one I'm expecting an 8 or a 9 on. Again, those print lines, just depends on how they're being graded. Sometimes graders will let one print line go if it's not noticeable as a 10. Sometimes they'll dock it down to an 8. Most of the time, I feel like it falls in the PSA 9 realm. But something to look forward if you're, or look toward if you're going to be grading your own cards, sending them in, is really make sure you put some light on those hollows and see the damage that's there before you send it off. Otherwise, you'll regret it. We got 2 Miracle Energies. And now we're wrapping up with our last few cards. I've got a couple oddities in here to start with. One is the E3 Pikachu, and this is actually the Yellow Cheeks variant. It's not worth as much as the Red Cheeks version. I do have several of those sealed, the Red Cheek ones that were given away at the E3 conference. Those aren't going to be in this PSA order, though. This one I'm submitting because it's in such good condition that I feel like it has a shot at a 10, and this card would be kind of cool to have in a 10. It's not one that I have in my collection at the moment. Same with the Jungle Wizards of the Coast W stamped Pikachu. It's got the W right underneath the jungle set. Kind of a cool promo, especially for the Pikachu collectors out there. This is one of the only cards that I'm submitting that's unlimited. I haven't really gone through any of my unlimited supply, but I did feel like the Shining Gyarados was in good enough condition that it's one that would probably be worthwhile to get graded. The backside is really clean. And now I wanted to round out my PSA order, and there were some commons in first edition that I wanted to send. Ultimately, there were about, I don't know, 50 or 60 that I wanted to grade. I was running out of card savers though, so I just picked some of the bigger ones, some of the starters. So we got 1 Charmander. We've got 2 Squirtles. And then for Pikachus, these are all Yellow Cheeks. But we'll be sending off 5 Pikachus in this order. These will range from 8s to 10, I'm sure. Most of them probably being 9s. There you go. That was a lot to take in. It's a very large PSA order this time around. And there's a second part to this order. Like I said, I ran out of card savers, so restocking. Once I get that stock, I'm going to send out order number 2. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching this video. This is the first PSA submission video that I've ever done. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. And if there's any specific cards or questions that you have for me, I'd be happy to answer those. There'll be another PSA submission video coming soon, and then when I get my PSA returns, I'll let you guys know how we did. All right, guys, we'll see you with the next video. Till then, take care, everybody. See ya.